Finding Joy in the Holy Land, Israel, Part 2. Jerusalem was green and beautiful, combining ancient and modern, mountains and valleys. We were on Mount Moriah, which is important to Christians, Jews, and Muslims. It is the mount on which Abram was about to offer Isaac as a sacrifice to God. The first temple, built by King Solomon, stood on top of this mount from about 1000 BCE to 586 BCE, when it was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. The mount is also the site of the second temple, which was built in about 515 BCE by returning exiles. It was in about 19 to 9 BCE that King Herod expanded the existing temple into Herod's temple, which Jesus cleansed. In AD 70, the Romans destroyed it, leaving important remains, including the Western or Wailing Wall. The old city is divided into the Muslim quarter, the Christian quarter, the Armenian quarter, the Jewish quarter, and the Dome of the Rock, which occupies the former site of the two earlier Jewish temples dating back to the 19th century. The 7 gates of the city were designated during the 16th century as Damascus Gate, Golden Gate, Herod's Gate, Jaffa Gate, Lion's Gate, Silvan Gate, known now as Dung Gate, and Zion Gate. The Temple Wall and Western Wall hold particular significance for Judaism. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre has great meaning for Christianity, and the Dome of the Rock and the mosque are important for Muslims. The old city, including its walls, was made a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1981. We arrived in time to witness Orthodox Jews dressed in their finery gathering at the sacred Western Wall at sunset on Shabbat to pray. Men and women were segregated. Notes were seen squeezed into the cracks of the walls. We too approached and touched the wall. We saw the ruins of the city of David adjacent to the Western Wall, where David, Solomon, and other kings are buried. We also saw the section labeled David's Tomb, where David's wives, concubines, and their offspring are likely buried. The upper room where Jesus celebrated the Last Supper was noticed in the southern part of the old city on Mount Zion. It is in that room that Jesus washed his disciples' feet, held the Last Supper, and appeared to the disciples before and after his resurrection. Covered with groves of olive trees, the Mount of Olives also adjoins the old city. It is the mount from which Jesus ascended to heaven. The mount has been used as a Jewish cemetery for over 3,000 years, with countless graves covering the slope. The Via Dolorosa depicts the painful path of the cross. Although we reminded ourselves of the 14 stations, we walked backwards, only from station 7 to station 1. We were made aware that there are competing candidates for the tomb of Jesus. Since the early 4th century, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre has been revered as the location of the tomb. However, this is contested. The grave's marble slab is known to be imported. Further, since the tomb would not have been sacred to Jews, the Romans would probably not have made it a priority to build a church to cover that site. For these reasons, other options were therefore open. We were told that in 1867, to provide a cistern, a tomb was excavated at the base of a low cliff in that area. It was closed back when it was thought that the cave may be of archaeological interest. In 1883, outside the northern wall and near the Damascus Gate, an English visitor pointed out the uncanny resemblance between a prominent rocky outcropping and the form of a skull. He connected this to the biblical Golgotha. The proximity to the tomb, which was excavated in 1867, also piqued his interest. The tomb was reopened, funds were raised to purchase the plot, and excavations subsequently revealed both archaeological and traditional evidence to support this spot as the likely burial location, having a 1st century unfinished tomb in a garden near to the place looking like a skull. Located outside the walls of Jerusalem and under a grove of olive trees, protected by the Church of the Agony, the Garden of Gethsemane is a quiet retreat, a place of solitude. It was in the garden that Jesus spent his final hours and prayed his last prayer after having the Last Supper with his disciples. Sitting on a rock in this garden, with hedges of fragrant rosemary plant, was a refreshing experience. Visitors also had Holy Communion. Bethesda means house of mercy and healing. The Pool of Bethesda is located just north of the Temple Mountain on the same grounds as the Church of St. Anne, which is famous for its exceptional acoustics. In 1130 AD, the Basilica of St. Anne was built over the grotto, believed to be the birthplace of Mary, the mother of Jesus. From Bible times, there was a pool with 5 porticos or porches. Changes were made over time. Over the years, many persons came to dip in the pools of Bethesda and were healed. During Jesus' time, there was a disabled man who was unable to descend the steps and so was never the first person to get into the pool when the water started moving. However, his persistence paid off, since he was healed by Jesus after 38 years of trying. The Jerusalem experience was complex and sometimes confusing on the one hand, and inspiring and enlightening on the other. There was so much information in a short time, so many places and events in one general location, that it took time to make sense of what I saw, heard, and felt. The imposing Temple Mount and its checkered history, the old city with its narrow streets, built-up walls, churches, monuments, schools, and shops were difficult to situate. The contest between history and tradition in choosing the location of holy sites was a bit unsettling. But then it became clearer and inspiring on realizing that it was all about Jesus' mission, exemplified by his teaching in the temple, healing at Bethesda, and by his death and burial, as shown by the Via Dolorosa. Happily, there were also pointers towards his resurrection, giving to believers the hope of eternal life.